Welcome everybody. My name's Cameron. Welcome to Rubber Flower. We have spaghetti for you to eat. We have drinks for you to consume. We have books for sale and t-shirts for sale. I run a press along with several people here called Tilted House, and we do biannual reviews and other things, including this reading. And so any support you can give puts money into the press, and we publish people locally and make this thing happen. Cool. What else? There was another thing. Oh, we're going to be filming tonight right over here. So if you don't want to be on camera, come talk to me or Sean right here about that. If you don't want to have your face online or anything. And that's about it. Yeah? Cool. All right. We have two featured poets, and then we have a break, and then we have an open mic session. But I'm going to give an introduction to each of these wonderful poets tonight. Here's the first introduction. Even though it can sometimes be trite, trivial, or counter the desired effect, there is a place almost inevitably for the eye in poetry, for identity to plant its foot. Whether the poet is confessing raw, personal experience or relaying their take on geopolitics without the eye existing in plain sight, it's impossible to not have a stance that is identifiable, however amorphous or fluid the content. The lack of eye in our next reader's work does not mean it lacks identity. That's the heart of it. But instead of announcing me, with a sort of messianic declaration, Chuck Perkins whispers we, us, this world, through his power. This is not to say his work is bereft of the eye, but that when it is present, it is self-aware and reaching out with alms. Chuck is gigantic and gentle, hurricane and dewdrop, blunt force trauma, and the ice pack that follows. Times-Picayune says he recites poetry like a prize fighter, always going for a knockout. But I want to restate that both in personality and poetry, Chuck contains that balm you hope for after being knocked on your ass. Friend and poet Rodrigo Toscano says that a poem should be a proposition, that the poem is to be set down on the table between the poet and the reader so that a conversation may arise. In other words, the poem is best as a sandwich made, cut in half, and placed on the family table, not half chewed and peeking from the poet's mouth. Even when Chuck's poetry is a mouthful, whether in rhetoric or polemics or dualities or commemoration, it is digestible and leaves you wanting more. Chuck Perkins is a huge component of New Orleans culture, an ambassador of the arts, Marines veteran, and a poetry mogul at the one and only Cafe Istanbul. He's performed alongside greats like Chuck D, Muta Baruka, Mos Def, and he's performed both domestically and internationally, including in London and at the South Bank Center with none other than the great Amiri Baraka. Here he is, New Orleans' own Chuck Perkins. Also, if you love these poets, I want to introduce this idea of burlesque poetry that Maya is idea. If you like the poet, throw money at the poet. Yeah? There's a tip bucket right there.
All right. Thanks a lot, y'all. Cameron, thank you so much, you and Maya, for inviting me here. So during the pandemic, I wrote a memoir. It's called Back of Town. And so I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm going to read an excerpt from the memoir, and then if I have enough time, I'll read a couple poems as well. And so this section deals with the fact that, okay, I'm born and raised in New Orleans, and I don't know, I guess when you look at the news, it seems like violence, it seemed like it was something that was starting to dwindle all across the country, and now it's starting to spike again, right? And the reality is that I'm from what they call the 17th Ward, Pigeon Town, Uptown, baby, you heard me. And violence has always been a part of my world, And when I wrote this passage, I realized that I grew up in a house. I got 3 brothers, a sister, a mother, and a father. And that's 7 people in one house. And all 7 of us have had to deal with the experience of looking down the barrel of a gun. And it's pathetic and sad. But I wrote about that, and I hope you guys like it. So I'll get started. So, starts off with my sister. Her name's Deoncia, but we always call her Dee Dee. Dee Dee was feeling down after breaking up with her boyfriend. She attempted to get her mind off the guy going to the movies with Larry. He was our neighbor and friend who lived about 5 houses down from us. I always suspect Larry of being sweet on my sister, but she insists their outing wasn't a date. They were hanging out as friends. The movie ended about 11 p.m. Larry and Dee Dee headed home. They caught the 2-lane bus, which dropped them off on the corner of Carrollton and Claiborne. This was the last stop on the bus line across the street from Time Saver's convenience store and Tasty Donuts. It was nearly midnight by the time they made it there because it was so late. Larry suggested they catch a cab. That was something we never did. Larry must have had a bad feeling since they were only 5 blocks from our home. Dee Dee thought it was a dumb idea. She suggested they walk the rest of the way, but before doing so, they stopped in Tasty's and bought some donuts and milk to snack on later. The next morning, my dad came into the room and woke us up. He asked if we heard about what happened to my sister. My heart was beginning to sink to my feet. I was sure he was about to say something awful had happened, but he calmed us down to let us know everything was okay. He explained she had been robbed at gunpoint the night before. For the first 14 years of my life, my parents kept us close to the house. Many of my friends appeared to be able to go whenever they pleased and come home whatever time they wanted, but we couldn't. If we wanted to attend a party, we were asked all kinds of questions like who was giving it, where was it going to be, who else was going, would a grown-up be there? After giving us the 3rd degree, my mom and dad might still say no. When we started catching the bus home from unsupervised night events, my friends would look at Charles and I and laugh whenever the bus stopped. They know they would see my mom stick her head out of the screen door looking for us. I'm sure she was praying to see her boy step off the bus. This embarrassed me every time. There was no way I could understand the anxiety of a black mother releasing her young sons into a hostile world for the first time. It was less than 2 years before Dee Dee's mugging that we were given some autonomy over our lives. It was a gradual process. And now my parents' worst fear was coming to pass. My 17-year-old sister couldn't walk 5 blocks shrouded in newfound freedom without getting a gun stuck in her face. Dee Dee said my dad laughed after he was sure she was okay. He explained that that was the reason he didn't like her wearing so much jewelry. Multiple gold chains and rings on every finger was a popular look in those days. Dee Dee was wearing every piece of jewelry she owned, as well as a few borrowed items, including a gold chain that belonged to my father. After the dust settled, her friends teased her by saying when she got robbed, 4 people got robbed at the same time. I was relieved my sister was okay, and later I got all the details. Her and Larry had gone to the movies, and they were walking on Claiborne Avenue a few blocks from our house. A man and a woman ambushed them. The guy put a gun to Larry's head, and the woman held one to Dee Dee's. Dee Dee said Larry was cool and calm. The guy who was robbing them discovered after patting Larry's pocket that he hadn't handed over his loose change. The robber said, "Nigga, I thought I told you to give me everything." Despite their precarious predicament, Larry responded, "If I give you everything, I wouldn't have anything to make a phone call." Larry's candor surprised Dee Dee. He was instructed to take off his shoes and walk toward Leander Street barefooted. They threatened to kill my sister if he stopped walking. Larry complied. He handed over his wallet and jewelry, and he removed his tennis and headed toward the corner. But he refused to leave beyond that point. He stayed where he could see my sister. Dee Dee became more afraid when she realized Larry wasn't moving past the corner. My childhood friend and neighbor couldn't abandon my sister, but she thought his courage was jeopardizing her life. They took her jewelry as well as a hat, purse, and boots. To add insult to injury, the robbers took their donuts and milk. Dee Dee said when they let her go, she started running and ran past Larry, who was still standing on the corner. The two of them ended up back in Tasty. A customer was nice enough to give them change to make a phone call. Dee Dee called my father after she called the police. The police who responded was David Singleton, a friend from the park. He brought Dee Dee and Larry to the police station to see if they could identify the perpetrators. The ordeal was a head scratcher because even though she and Larry had described the robber as being a light-skinned male with a medium complected female, they were only shown dark-skinned males. By the time my dad was telling us about what happened, his sense of humor evaporated. He encouraged us to be cautious and to always be aware of our surroundings. His face stood silent, half angry about what happened to my sister and half afraid of the omnipresent danger that stalked us all. My father got his turn to stare down the barrel of a gun years before my sister, and times my mother and her 4 sons would join them, getting their chance to play the game. How far down the barrel did you see, making this a full house? The first bar my grandfather owned was called Lucky Twos. Mr. Cooley was an old man I met who remembered it. He said the saying was you had to be lucky 2 times. You had to be lucky to get in and lucky to get out. My father recounted an incident when he almost didn't get out. He said they were gambling in the bar and had gone outside with a guy who had lost money. Once outside, the man drew his gun and demanded his money back, but all the money was inside. He decided to shoot my dad, who jumped behind a gate, and by stroke of luck, a lock stopped the bullet from hitting him. He knew that my grandfathers and others had no idea what was happening in front of the bar, but he instinctively acted as if they were coming. He started yelling shit like, "Hurry up, shoot these niggas." He succeeded in convincing his would-be killers that help was on the way, and they ran off. My mother had a job working as a bartender in Shrewsbury. She was going to work one night, and unfortunately, she walked in on the robbery. She explained how the robber drew their weapons and took everything. They slapped her in the face before leaving. She was the only person singled out, causing her to wonder if the assailant was from Pigeontown and if the assault against her was a result of an old grudge. Charles and I were roommates while I attended Xavier, and someone was always at our apartment. After graduating, I took a job in Texas. The apartment would be completely deserted until Charles returned home from work. One day he walked in on a robber, taking the time to neatly wrap cords around the VCRs and stereo equipment. When my brother walked in, the dude asked, "Do you live here?" Charles said, "You fucking right." The guy reached for a gun and they fought over it before the intruder ran out the door. Charles moved to a new apartment the next day. Tyrone is my baby brother. He said he was almost shaking hands with Abraham on at least 5 different occasions. Once his wife Chris drove him to his friend's apartment. As he walked to the door, he noticed a dude that seemed suspicious, but he didn't make a big deal of it. When the door opened, the suspicious guy tackled him into the apartment. That's when he found himself looking down the barrel of an AK-47. In the meantime, Chris saw what happened to Tyrone and hid on the floor of the car. They made Ronnie, that's what we used to call my little brother, they made Ronnie take his shoes off before instructed him to get up and go to the back. Tyrone said he was more afraid of going to the back because he didn't know what he would find there. He told him whatever was going to happen needed to happen where they were. They insisted he get the fuck up. Tyrone stood up and they pushed him into the bathroom. He was surprised to see several of his friends there. They whispered amongst themselves, trying to discern what was going on. Finally, one of the robbers opened the door. He said, "We leaving, and I dare you niggas to call the police. I'll be standing out front, and the first head I see come out the door, I'm gonna make it ring like the fucking 4th of July." When he left, they started discussing who would be the first to go out the door. Tyrone said, "I have to go, my wife is down there." He peeked his head out. After he didn't see anyone, he ran to his car and Chris opened the door. She drove off asking, "What the fuck was that all about?" There was another time when Tyrone was with friends drinking in the parking lot of some apartments. He said he noticed a car rolled past with the back door open about 6 inches. He looked at his friends and asked, "Y'all ain't see that?" One of them said, "T, you tripping." And Tyrone began to retreat as soon as he saw the car headed back toward the group. Within seconds, bullets were flying in every direction and everybody ran. While describing the scene, Tyrone told me that he had a better understanding of why guys are being shot at in the movies always falling. He said while running, he must have fell at least 20 times. His friend Ren was shot in the leg. He pleaded with Tyrone, words drowning in fear. He said, "Don't leave me, Perk. Tyrone agreed to stay until he heard the police or ambulance. When the sirens were about a block away, he reassured Ren that the ambulance knew where to find him before leaving. Tyrone didn't want to have any involvement with the police. My baby brother was fortunate to escape so many close calls, but his best friend Claude couldn't. He was murdered in the drive-thru at a Taco Bell in Baton Rouge, and the crime has never been solved. He bumped into Claude's cousin at a club, and she said she needed to speak to him. They walked outside and found a place to talk. She looked at my brother and said, "I know you had something to do with my cousin's murder. You two were always together, and I find it suspicious that the night he was killed, you weren't around." Tyrone was surprised by the comment, but he understood her logic. He looked at her and said, "Claude was my main man, and I love him like a brother." He informed her that they were supposed to be together the night Claude was murdered, but Chris said if Tyrone went with Claude, they wouldn't be able to go to church in the morning. She suggested Tyrone stay home. The next day, they could barbecue in the backyard, and Claude could come over after church. That's the only reason they weren't together. James was 15 years old, occupying his time playing a video game at Time Savers. This was a chain of 24-hour convenience stores that used to dominate the New Orleans region. One of the store employees noticed a white police officer outside. She mentioned to James that he seemed interested in him. James didn't pay much attention to the comments since he hadn't done anything. He rushed out of the store to catch the last Palmer Park bus. During the ride home, he watched 5 police cars with flashing lights stop the bus. It was bum rushed by 4 cops entering through both doors with their guns drawn and headed toward James. They said, "We got you now. Where's the fucking gun?" James was traumatized in disbelief. He had never done drugs, and by this time he had never even held a gun. He was clueless about what they were talking about. The police manhandled him off the bus, put him in the back of the police car. In James's estimation, they never considered they might be wrong. Apparently, the post office had been robbed, and somehow they suspected James as the perpetrator. The officer drove him to the scene of the crime in hopes that an eyewitness could identify him. James was threatened and harassed during the ride. He was embarrassed by the tears that welled in his eyes. After arriving at the post office, there was a back and forth conversation that lasted 10 minutes. They realized they had the wrong person and released him. Not only did the cops not apologize, they made him walk home from the post office. He thought they should have at least brought him back to where they picked him up. Coach Palmer was one of the coaches at the park. He happened to be the postmaster at the facility that was robbed. When he found out that James had been detained by the police, he said that it was a damn shame because James is a medium-height, light-skinned teenager. The guy who robbed the post office was a tall, dark-skinned older man. James and I were together for another close encounter. We got into an argument with the guy over absolutely nothing unless petty pride counts for something. There were 4 of us in the car, and the guy shot up the entire car. Luckily, no one was hit. I will share that story later. What happened to us wasn't boring. Our families have been preparing us for these situations since we were in diapers, which is why we were kept close to home for so long. But we were no longer babies who could be shielded from a harsh and unfair world. Targets were on our backs and bombs were exploding all around. Over the coming years, the bodies would add up. The 7 residents who lived under one roof were all victims, but I can name over 80 men who have been murdered in this city. There was no place for us to escape to. Victor Hugo said, "If the soul is left in the darkness, sins will be committed. The guilty one is not he who commits the sin, but the one who causes the darkness." My family was not snake bitten, nor was my neighborhood, or neighborhoods like it across the country. This social malaise is a man-made dystopia forged from the guts of African people. The protagonists were kept uneducated and with dysfunctional family ties after having been brutalized with whips and branding irons. They endured a reign of terror that has lasted 400 years. The antagonist has amnesia. He constructed this house of horrors, and now he's blaming the injured. It is a gross reality of stamping the victim with the scarlet letter of guilt. And this is the last little bit, y'all. And now we must convince the world, and more importantly ourselves, that we are not responsible for doing what has been done to us. If it is true that hurt people, then what happens when the trauma is relentlessly excruciating and generational? I realized that the men who could have killed us were themselves angry victims raging against their own pain. Therefore, I cannot hate them. Even if they can't understand this vicious cycle, my focus is clear. They are not the ones who caused the darkness. Thanks a lot. The uncivilized boast about civility, still won't let my body be. Loves his money more than peace. He kills men with no mercy. Calls my anger in my heat. Uncivilized, boast about civility. Lives in a gilded house by the sea. Blood on his hand and stank on his feet. Hoards the foods while the baby's hungry. Gluttony is what he be. In the valley of death is the bad man's feast. Who's uncivilized? The pleasant dreamer cannot understand why the nightmare dreamer is so disruptive. The pleasant dreamer wants to bask in the sanctuary of his delightful getaway, and he doesn't believe that it's asking too much for the nightmare dreamer to control his outbursts and suffer his horrors in silence. Images in popular culture be hurting my brothers and Johnny Weissmuller in a 1940 Tarzan movie. Gangster images be beating the pants off young brothers, tying them to images they should be trying to escape. Desperados are born in hoods where low-lying dreams hang like distant fantasies. Innocence is the bloody mark of the victim, smells like pussy, makes the wolves crazy. Its aroma arouses their senses like the pungent scent of raw flesh, so the softest souls fabricate hardcore facades, trying to keep the dogs off their bones. Sheep run with wolves, chickens learn to bark, tragic casualties of poverty. And fear's like bad gas. Everybody has to deal with it at some point, but nobody's claiming ownership. It is the coward's perspiration, the burnt refuse of a piss-pumping heart. Dudes learn to camouflage their fears with gold-toothed smiles, menacing tattoos, and mad dog stares. Because in the hood, fear is for hoes, but in reality, it's suicide logic. Some dudes posture when they should run, fuck it, I'll die. Let them come. You gotta get it like you live, dog. So dogs eat dogs. I'm gonna read this one more, and after this, I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit. But this is kind of some dark shit too. I grew up with this guy, and this is, I mean, it might sound hyperbolic, but it really isn't. This dude I'm talking about right here, just based on what I hear in the street, he very well could have been one of the most notorious fucking hitmen in New Orleans in the last fucking 100 years. Boy had bodies. And we grew up together, you know? And the strange thing about him is that a lot of people who came from my neighborhood who ended up like that, you could trace it. That dude was raising himself. They got reasons, but this guy had two loving parents, a father, a hardworking father who was a mailman. So how he ended up like this, I have no fucking idea. But he became that kind of dude, you know. And so one of our good friends, they still used to say, this guy was murdered probably like maybe a couple years before Katrina. But one of my good friends, they still spend a lot of time together. And he told me something that I could not get out of my mind. And so I actually wrote this poem lying in a bed in France somewhere, because my friend had just told me this a couple of days before and I couldn't get it out of my mind. He said, this dude who I'm telling you about, because I don't even like saying his name, because he said, man, Chuck, the dude felt like he could do anything. Right? He said, but there was one thing that he couldn't do. And it's go to sleep at night. Say, man, he hated to go to sleep at night.
And he said the reason he ain't like going to sleep because he said every nigga I ever killed chasing me in my fucking dreams. So imagine that, man. That you got that kind of life where you can't even, you hate to close your eyes because you got to deal with all the shit you did, you know. And so I wrote this about him, and then we'll lighten it up after that. We'll leave this darkness.
How does it seem? Every man you ever killed chasing in your dreams. Ghosts run you up walls. Your silent cries make your skin crawl. Your cold blood is steaming. You lie down for silence, but filled with screaming, see the death bells ringing. Hey, hey, killer, your nightmare's a thriller. Ever since you pulled that trigger, you killed your brother, and don't call him nigga. You gotta run now. Cry of the dead in your head, and you can't turn it off. The cry of the dead in your head, and you can't turn it off. Raindrops sound like gunshots, and it's never gonna stop. Raindrops sound like gunshots, and it's never gonna stop. Rain, rain, raindrops sound like gunshots, and it's never gonna stop. It's your turn to run now. It's never no fun when the rabbit gets the gun. It's never no fun when the rabbit gets the gun. Now you gotta run. And while you're always running, the rabbit's slowly walking. You're hiding in your dreams, but the rabbit's slowly stalking your dreams, your dreams. Your dreams smell like Baghdad, and it's gonna drive you mad. Your dreams smell like Baghdad, and it's gonna drive you mad. And you better say your prayers, 'cause you can't kill your nightmares, and you can't kill your nightmares. It's your turn to run. The cry of the dead's in your head, and you can't turn it off. The cry of the dead's in your head, and you can't turn it off. You got to run now. You're slipping in your dreams, burn up by your cold. Your humanity is shattered. You ain't got no soul. The sweat is on your face with the fast heartbeat. Ever since you shot that gun, you can't get no sleep. Close your eyes. You're afraid to be alone. Be glad it won't be long, for the devil calls you home. Close your eyes. You're afraid to be alone. Be glad it won't be long, for the devil calls you home. Rainbows are the hit messages of peace found in the movement of the alabaster clouds projected on the belly of the invisible sky. The yellow moon is the eyeball of a black cat who sleeps with one eye open, lying witness to miracles of pirouetting stars. Daylight is the sun's gift to earth. It is delivered in 7 minutes. The lover boy sun is constantly in hot pursuit. Flattered, the earth occasionally trembles. Mountains are subsequent goosebumps. Trees are mostly temperamental. Sometimes they seem to go with the wind. Other times they stand silent, stoic, and still. Oak trees like to stand with this attitude like they're the royalty in the tree world, but their outstretched branches can't mask their surrender to something more majestic than they. Rain is liquid confetti. Mother Nature made New Orleans in his own image. There's always a reason to party, and sometimes the party can get out of hand. Thunder and lightning, there's too much testosterone at the party. Spiders are the world's greatest dancers. One spider can execute a singular dance move that would require the legs of 4 men. Spider webs are coded dance patterns. Some sneaky hieroglyphics expert probably decoded a spider web to figure out how to do the boogaloo, and since they've never been given credit, spiders have been pissed ever since. Humans have arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. Spiders have humophobia, the fear of two-legged plagiarists. Flanked between the earth and sky, the horizon is in a constant state of horizontal levitation. Like a magic carpet, the horizon is the X. It represents the unknown. It is the North Star of the curious. The imagination's kicking the ass. If necessity is the
mother of invention, then desire is a relentless father. The necessity to sail the ocean was born out of the desire to touch the horizon. Sane men have trekked across hostile deserts to sip her tea, taste her fruit, and locate the source of her magic. A flock of robin were the first to paint the town red. From the moment the great watchmaker glued on his first set of feathers, birds have been composing a soundtrack of the world. They articulate melodies of liberation. They flap their wings and ride the back of the wind. They're the freest amongst us. They have no songs of war, and they never sang the blues. Close out with this last one, y'all. Thank y'all so much. Again, I want to thank you guys for inviting me to come. I really enjoy it. And thank you, and Cameron, I probably wouldn't have read that excerpt, but I had sent Cameron some other passages from that memoir, and there was another one. He said, man, maybe you could read like one of those. So thank you. I'm glad I got a chance to read it. This is the last poem, and listen, y'all. I gotta head out after I do this because I got the mark going on, and I gotta get down there for that. But I gotta tell you, I hate fucking poets who come and read their shit and then they don't want to hear about it. Fuck him. No, I know. Maybe people got business. I don't act like that. But I wouldn't do it myself if I didn't have to be back there. I would. If the day were the worst day ever, anything short of death, we still have tomorrow. Tomorrow's another shot at the fork in the road. It's a chance to stand after your kneecaps have been shattered. Tomorrow's blue skies are green and has no memories of the day's slip-ups. It has no memories of the day's savagery. Tomorrow's a mound of clay, waiting for a sculptor to uncover its masterpiece. Tomorrow's wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. When the sun rises, it's tomorrow waking up, flashing its brilliant smile. Before you kiss her, release those toxic agents of bloom that slowly siphons the heat from your fire. Tell them it's time to part ways. Find tomorrow without them. Let them live in the past. The sun's gonna rise under clear skies. The birds will fly, and tomorrow will ride. So if your day arrived up in smoke, if you wrinkled your ride or your boat don't float, if the pain came and burnt your hope, dumped a lot of rain and left you broke, sent you ready for the world flame up in smoke. If you're having a bad hair day, sad because the cards won't fall your way. If you can't keep your train on the track, folding queens but peeping jacks. If the rain kept you from seeing the sun. If you wept and wept because your ring didn't come. If your eagle don't fly, if your motor don't run. If it seemed like your star's losing its shine. If you dream in your car about losing your mind. If your hot soup's cold or your cornflakes soggy. If you powder your nose so your head's all foggy. If you swear the rain's never gonna cut. If it's hard to bear a pain in your gut. If you wake up on the wrong side of the bed shaking because your bank statement's red. If you fly your son at half mast because your dying soul seems out of gas. Remember, anything short of death, we still got tomorrow. The sun's gonna rise and the clear skies, the birds will fly, and tomorrow we'll ride, ready to save the day, tossing a bouquet of hope and opportunity, riding to the rescue like the prince of a fresh start. Tomorrow is 100% sunny and clear. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
One more time for Chuck, everybody. And if you like the work, please tip the poet. I want to really encourage this burlesque situation. I said enjoy the bar. Chuck, everybody. All right. A lot of people came in. Thanks for coming, everybody. Those of you who are new here, please help yourself to some spaghetti and some drinks. And also, there's a carpet here for anyone who wants to sit up front, not with the ants and the mosquitoes. Come on up. Come on. You gonna want this?
No.
All right, another introduction. As someone with synesthesia, in which one sensory stimulation leads to an involuntary reaction of another sense, hearing and seeing the word transcendence triggers in me a colorful braid of letters, sounds, and feelings. The word transcendence is a long, narrow word with equal sonic lengths, a balanced color wheel of greens, yellows, dark blues, and one red dot, and feels to me like space travel. The balance of this word creates the appropriate vessel able to move beyond expectations of what is normal. It would be impossible to touch on every artistic realm that our next reader moves through: puppetry, special effects, film, music, theater. But her writing, on its own, transcends narrative and contemporary expectations of poetry. It is not equal parts anything, but it utilizes aspects of traditional poetic themes, oral storytelling, and both conventional and personal mythology that creates a new, slightly uncomfortable breed. In a single poem, you may find a socially democratic presidential candidate, dinosaur saliva, sex, and race analysis living in polemic harmony. Or in another, the magic of talking fish, fatherhood, sleep paralysis, and the presence of demons. There is humor, there is space, there is shock. The texture of pumice meets the texture of silk. Vivid landscapes, vivid dreamscapes meet black tie dinner parties, and plain language meets peronomasia. The mashing up of these components fosters the unity of left brain with right brain, good with evil, sweet with sour. Her work is sensitive and personal, while also hammering on the gates of power, harnessing magic, the abstract, and like a car crash, using the grotesque to keep you staring. All five senses are tickled and tugged at, and at times you'll find your sixth sense grinning. And if you listen closely, you'll notice a subcurrent of polyrhythmic and bidirectional phrasing that pulls at itself like a lion trapped in a sweater. Like the artist herself transcending mediums of craft, her poetics transcend category and sends you twisting in your feels. Maya has performed as a resident jazz vocalist and lyricist at the Kimmel Center in Philadelphia, has collaborative work in the French comic anthology Metal Hurlant, is a mime and clown on the street and on stage, and has just won the Emerging Voices Fellowship from the New Orleans Film Society. Please join me in welcoming Maya Raquel.
To live up to a Cameron introduction. Hi y'all, I'm Maya. Thank you so much for having me. And Chuck is not here anymore, but I just feel really honored to share this night with him because he truly is a space creator for artists and a beautiful, gifted poet. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for that. Move the mic up. Yeah, got you. So I'm gonna read some poems for y'all. I'm gonna start with this one that is called Things You Don't Want to Hear on the Operating Table. At least this time I'm sober. Where is it again? I'm sure that will hold. I really hope she bleeds less than the last guy. What species is the specimen? Can I put my gum wrapper here? Do not unleash the birds from that gushing orifice. She'd look better with a little lipstick. I bet you I can find the heart through the vaginal cavity. This is the worst I've ever seen. Her wound bouquets have bees. Her knees, not what you'd think. Let's just take a little from there and put it over here. I'd never fuck a girl with this kind of bone density. That's a funny sound. I coughed into the gash. I'm getting hungry. Can we wrap this up? I have a wife to touch tenderly, waiting for me on a steel table, foaming at her open chest. I'm gonna read a few poems now from a little chapbook that I wrote earlier this year, and it's about a character named Nobody, and it's a lot about sex and politics and being in the world after experiencing violence, and how everything is sex and politics. So that's what it's about. Fucking American. Nobody thinks about Bernie Sanders and the mountains as he fucks her. An air vent bites the soft of her thighs. Press powder stegosaur roaring forget-me-nots. The blood in his face pulls his cheeks above her like boulders frame a dripping sky, hiked out pit, sweaty with that new Messiah awe. Slaps her, she is the 3 a.m. plan for families and children for whom healthcare is a fleeting visitor, in and out, and in and out, and in and out, her fists and hands nailed to the wall. Below her, she will die, she must die, most will die for their kin. Some will die in the desert in between his beating brow, or find home in the hollows of hard work, white and blue. He works hard in the valley of her womb, climbing to peaks, holy handhold of all that is below us and above us. And behind us, we put the horror of the last guy, and behind her, she remembers the tender of no guy, everlasting fog, teasing the sharp tongue of volcanic tweets, belching early 2000s race analysis into woked-up yolk people, barely butter and bred by bullets. It is the 1, 2, and 3 of the shrieking bed frame. It is the one that will straddle the problem like a throbbing cock. It is the beautiful of skin against rock, turned office, turned top 10 wanted listings on this side of the up and coming, tells her she is wanted, with a hand over her face, limbs tied across both sides of the aisle, and stay still and just take it. What is one little ballot? It'll be over soon anyway, and maybe you'll choose to enjoy it a little.
Yeah.
Horse conclave. She was like booting a sitting fuck waiting to waddle into the barrel of a hairy fist. Or so the neighbors spoke through the ear line of passerbys when they shouted across her clobbered corpse, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" Some said homicide or an ice cream truck, but the marvel was how she dangled, almost floating from the second floor balcony, her makeup immaculate and her hair styled up about her shoulders. It was godly, like nobody died to float above her subjects, a guest at her own funeral, where no one thought to check the rise and fall of her chest, which pulsed reaching and tumbling as it always had, but she was much better liked in her cadaver endeavors, a blemish emblem of the neighborhood notches. In the night, she unspeared herself from the steel of her assumed deceased, cooked herself a meal, returned by morning to slide the railing's knuckle into the scabbing entryway of her worshipped woe, to be everybody's easy way into death, everyone's something holy, everyone's look at that, what happened. This one is called Polymorphous. Nobody runs with her eyes closed into the serrated edge of somebody's wrong side of the bed of greens, undressed with the hunger untouched flesh tends to well with, under layers of polyester echoes of another woman coming beside the stunning look he had left her beneath the same sheets where she stitched herself flimsy into shrugs, and whatever everyone needs, seen needy in her nervous lonely, sister wives diving school, learning leaps needed to seep through secret sheet washing, overlapping love flashing whipped lingerie in her walkway, sinking ships in her guts behind a sorry smile, closing door, first safe love in a crazy making tiger cage. Nobody, the villain who volunteered and then complained, the ruiner in the kitchen, knowing how lost a home can travel when she's broken and entered. Thread count, 2 count, red count, blue dish cracked, with a vein so thin, its pulse not felt until she's dripping in the juice it couldn't hold. Cool, so those were some poems from Nobody. This is another little list poem. Things to avoid saying on a first date. Interesting outfit choice. Have you ever considered co-signing a loan? You know, I have a +1 for a funeral next week. You'd be worth a yeast infection. You look exactly like my mother. All my exes hate me. I love you. You look good wearing the darkness. There's a hungry lion behind a door in this house. I'm crazy for you. Want to lace you into my boots, crush something soft into the earth. You got a smile like a mugshot. You smell like meat before it's finished searing. Does anyone know where you are? I like a woman who's not afraid to close herself between two locks. Because how is one supposed to sweep a lady off her feet when she's so heavy with all those bullets up her sleeve? I started writing a lot of recipe poems this year that have nothing to do with cooking. So this is one of those. Recipe for horniness. Sharpen your knives before finding the base of your tits, the savage desired, where it meets the simple of bone, and snick to begin before using your nails, before taking your hips, before dripping from the pinks of your meat, the floor slapped with slides of skin. Find your reflection in whatever shines, and stand in effigy of a body simplified, unrecognizable from the cereal slurping flesh, who framed the flooded sink this morning, unsatiated by the bruise of standing breakfasts. Tell her you like seeing her this way without her skin, that her unmasked intestines look good without makeup, and lull in the light of her undefended stare, cherish where this craved climbs into the cave of her thigh polyps, breathes into miles worn, feeling full and warm, blood soaked through the naked nape of her peeled and pulsing neck. Things to leave out of her eulogy. One tit was bigger than the other. She still owes me $50. She wasn't always kind to her mother. But what I loved the most was how her curtains matched the bedspread, her forks and spoons like brothers, as though she peeled out all the things from the catalog summer spread. I will miss that, the quality of her cotton sheets. Okay, I missed one from Nobody, also that I didn't want to read, but then I just decided right now that I'd like to. So I'm going to go back to that and read it. This one is called The Politics of Experience. Nobody rooms with a boy carrying interminable blues beneath white skin. It boils, turns an afternoon hot where his fingers graze it. He bills nobody by the bite of ice cream and tests the withering of the paste tube against the white of her teeth, leaves gum wrappers on her altar, the milk beside his bed. Once she tripped into his tempest, mistaking marinade for marinade, so flung her timid rage and told him that he ought to learn a fucking omelet, that she was poured a body of blood that turns boulders to sand in the vulcanized eyes of dough-hearted men, but her skin stays tacky against the scoff of her enemy. He reminds her that a throat strong enough to swallow the sticks of lollipops doesn't mean we ever digest them, and when we rot into the earth, they are left there as they came, that the slime he leaves on saucepans is a cultural difference. He cites for her the non-magical sources of identity he has learned in a PhD program on the politics of experience. Sometimes in the night, she'd catch him, cornered in the couch, a panting mouse, peel him back like foreskin to find his ugly under the light of her stare until he's furred and purring, and when she finds his body strung from the ceiling, his mouth is the jagged eye hole of a child's ghost, fuzz on his face lifting against the breath of the air conditioner, and when she cuts him loose, she learns the thunder of a hollowed life, heavy in a way one rarely hears.
Yes.
Okay, I have just one more poem. Am I okay on time? Also, I have no. Okay,
Keep going.
cool. I have no idea how long it's been. I have one more longer poem, and this is a new. I just started writing it, sort of maybe a chapbook of sorts, and it's about my grandfather, who I don't know very well. He lives in another country, but he has dementia. And he's my only living biological grandfather. There's a lot of question marks for me in my lineage, and so I think I always thought I'd be able to sit down with him and ask him some questions, which I can't do anymore. He also happens to be super abusive, big narcissist, like a real one. And so there's this big relief that has come from his return to infancy. So just all the complicated parts of that, in addition to just the pain of losing all of your references to your own memories, is what has inspired this poem. And also just hearing that all he really does now is sit and watch the birds, which I was inspired by as well. Also for this, I have a really very dear friend of mine who's in town visiting, and we are gonna open and close the poem with a song together. So this is Ara. For you forever, but I couldn't, so I didn't. People's children die and they don't even cry forever. Thought I'd see your face in my mind for all time, but I don't even remember what your ears look like. And the clock still strikes midnight and noon, and the sun still rises, and so does the moon. Birds still migrate south, and people move on, even though I'm no longer in your arms. A bird disappears into a closet, and when the man opens its doors, a small house is growing inside. When he lifts his eyes to its windows, someone tells a joke that sends the dinner party spinning. Later, she finds him cradling a box of cutlery. On the table, he's left a list of every necklace she's ever worn. A bird does him the honor of being his wife, and they immigrate, buy a king-size bed. When he lifts his lids from their tears, she has already died. Later, her daughters remind him of something, maybe smashed windows or a glass of wine. On the table is a photo of a very pretty girl, probably from a magazine. A bird pecks the glass until he says, "All right, I'm sorry." When he lifts her onto his shoulder, they both begin to paw. Later, she pulls him back from the balcony and locks him in the bathroom. On the table, he draws a picture of a boy begging to fly. A bird soars above them as they search for good ice cream. When he lifts the little girl, she cracks into pieces, old and purple. Later, he's left alone and finds every word to that song. On the table, he dances, drunk on everything that lingers, like a joke and the smell of fish. A bird shits on his head as he takes her to a house he's never seen. When he lifts her through its falling doorway, it is covered in his image. Later, he knocks on many doors, insisting he's lived through every one. On the table in the living room is a closed fist. A bird tells a brilliant joke as he peels a fruit. When he lifts his hands to the faucet, a dream slips into them about a girl with a good laugh. Later, he leaves the window open for her in case her parents go to sleep early. On the table, peels are piling, clementines, but mangoes when he can get a good one. A bird performs a ballet about violence outside his window. When he lifts his hands to applaud, his fingers turn to knives. Later, he wanders the streets looking for help, but people run away screaming. On the table that night, he finds the rest of his beard, which he guesses he must have fingered away. A bird breaks in through the open window in his room. When he lifts his arms like wings, they take off together, singing. Later, he describes to her this urge to make apologies. On the table, she leaves him a note saying, "Me too, and I forgive you." A bird wakes him up from a nightmare about falling trees. When he lifts his body from the soaked chair, he can't believe how big his hands are. Later, he calls every number in the phone book to ask the shape of his father's chin. On the table, there's a map, and he holds it up in the mirror and cries. A bird sounds a siren before the people come. When he lifts his head to greet them, they rush to him like sheep. Later, he screams into a cup, feeling it get heavier in his palm. On the table, he pulls apart a finished puzzle, humming the words to the song that sweetened his first kiss. A bird wails in mourning. It unsettles the people waiting. When he lifts his head to find it, the sun looks directly at him. Later, at a movie screening, half the audience is abducted. On the table, the remaining members write the name of the film, but can never again recall what it was about. I cried for you forever, but I couldn't, so I didn't. Most children die and they don't even cry forever, but I see your face in my mind for all time, but I don't even remember what your ears looked like. That's all for me. Thank you.
One more time for Maya and Era as well.